Hi movie fans! In today's synopsis, we will be looking at the true story of bank robber Gilbert Galvan in the 2022 picture, Bandit. Stay to the end for our conclusion and don't forget to subscribe for more. In a hotel room in London, Canada, a man is playing with a pistol and working on a disguise. The room overlooks a nearby bank. The man goes to the bank and strolls up to the bank cashier and tells her to put the cash in the briefcase. He tells her not to trip the alarm and that all will be okay. He then makes a swift exit. A cop is stuffing his face when he gets a call for the robbery. He apprehends a man fitting the description. Meanwhile, the bank robber, now suited up, is making multiple calls to 911 reporting the robbery and soon joins a group of fez-wearing men to escape. He quickly celebrates in his hotel room, then goes back outside to talk with a cop interrogating the man misidentified as the robber. He then sees a car that's for sale pull up. He gives the lady a wad of cash, saying he will take the car. Neither of them counts the cash and he just drives off. True story, A. The cop is in the bank interrogating witnesses when Detective Snides, who is after the robber, appears and waves a photo asking people across the room if they recognize the person in the image. The cop says he thinks he saw the person get in a car and vamoose. The robber tells the camera that Snides can't seem to catch him and goes on to say he is using the alias Robert Whiteman. He has robbed 59 banks and grossed a total of $2.339 million. Canadian or US dollars is not clear. 4 years earlier in Detroit, Michigan, a lawyer is explaining to the judge how Gilbert is a victim of his circumstances. The judge sentences him to 18 months for check fraud regardless. 6 months later at St. Joseph's Minimum Security Correctional Facility, Gilbert is making a run for it. He's over the fence and out of there. He is soon in the back of a truck heading for Ottawa, Canada. Realizing he needs a job, he starts looking for one. Applying for a job at Mr. Frosty, he is told that he will need some ID, which he says he left in his car. He leaves to haggle with a panhandler for his ID, eventually paying $22. He is now
Robert Whiteman
and can apply for the job. Needing a place to stay, he heads to a church mission called the Good Shepherd. The door is answered by Andrea, who lays down the rules and takes his details. He does a bit of flirting, then heads to bed. He enjoys his job as a popsicle salesman and continues to stay at the Good Shepherd while saving his money. One day his boss tells him that he is getting made redundant and that they will be stiffing him on the $200 he is owed. He is rightly upset and takes the waistcoat as a small recompense. I reckon he should have taken one of the bikes. He does what anyone would do and heads over to the local strip joint. There is a man in there called Tommy, who is a mid-level criminal boss type, talking with an underling. When Gilbert leaves, he accidentally bumps into Detective Snyder. Snyder is there to make his presence known to Tommy, who gives him some verbal. After the strip club, Gilbert heads back to the Good Shepherd to take Andrea out for the night. They go for drinks and hit it off, with Andrea leaning in for a kiss. And then... 8 months later, Andrea and Gilbert are living together. Gilbert opens a newspaper and sees a story about him jumping the border. Hold on, what kind of newspaper has lorem ipsum filler in? That's some lazy-ass filmmaking. Anyway, Andrea is looking at a pregnancy test. Later that evening they talk. Gilbert starts and says he's off to work for a couple of weeks, but Andrea doesn't tell him her news. Gilbert takes a bus to Vancouver. He soon finds out that there aren't many jobs for him, and the dishwasher job he does go for is already taken. He notices an armored truck making a delivery. He daydreams about robbing the truck, but instead goes to call Andrea. She asks him to come home. He says that he will in a couple of weeks, to which she says,
"Robert, I'm pregnant."
Gilbert is very happy about this and wants them to be the best parents. The armored truck drives off and he can see it just delivered to a bank. Before you know it, he's casing the bank and shortly after, in a shop trying to get a disguise. He goes back to the bank disguised as a security specialist and is asking the staff about their security protocols. He questions a security guard and asks if they are hiring while surreptitiously pilfering a clipboard. Gilbert joins a class for actors to learn about making disguises. The big day comes and he plucks up the courage to enter the bank. He approaches the cashier and asks her to read a poorly written note. She asks him if he has a bag, but he doesn't, so she helps him out with a bank bag. While he is dicking around trying to zip the bag shut, his prosthetic nose comes away. He asks the cashier how he did and then leaves. He gets a flight back to Ottawa but gets nervous when he is supposed to have his bag x-rayed. Making an excuse, he goes back to the toilets and stuffs the cash in his underwear and on his body. As he approaches security a second time, the staff tells him they don't scan domestic carry-on. On the flight back, he learns about the Canadian Skyways frequent flyer program. On arrival, Andrea is waiting for him and they are ecstatic to see each other. Elsewhere, Detective Snides is attending a crime scene when a young go-get-em detective called Ray Hoffman tells him he is creating a task force to take down Tommy the Fence. Hoffman shows Snides his proposal and Snides is all in. Gilbert takes Andrea to a neighborhood house that he has bought them, along with a tasty-looking sweater. He tells her that his father has got him a high-paid security analyst job that he will have to travel to. When she asks to meet him, Gilbert tells her that his father doesn't believe in them living together out of wedlock. Gilbert needs some money to get his bank robbing career on track, so he goes to introduce himself to Tommy at the strip club. Tommy is suspicious and thinks he is a narc to be so bold. Gilbert takes Tommy to a window and tells him that he can rob the bank across the street in 3 minutes.
Bullshit,
says Tommy. If he can, he wants $10,000 for a 6-month loan. Gilbert runs across the street and into a portaloo, where he changes his outfit and comes out dressed in construction gear. He heads into the bank and doesn't come out. While Tommy is waiting, Gilbert manages to get out of the bank and into the club via a back entrance. In the club, he starts emptying out the cash, and Tommy gets them drinks to seal the deal. Flying around Canada, Gilbert racks up his air miles while robbing bank after bank and filling his safe with stacks of cash. For getting him started, Tommy gets his usual cut, not that Gilbert needs him anymore, but to keep him on side. Gilbert is robbing banks, spending money, filling his safe, and racking up so many air miles he's accepted to the Elite Flyers Club. Tommy and Gilbert are talking at the club and Tommy floats the idea of Gilbert doing a jewelry heist. Gilbert is not keen as jewelry is more personal than cash. Dave acts weird and grabs the briefcase to count the cash. Tommy pulls out a gun and tells Gilbert it might be useful but hides it when his 16-year-old daughter shows up. Detectives Hoffman and Snides get their approval for the task force. They set up in an abandoned building and start Project Cafe. They brief their team that the target is Tommy. Tommy is now under surveillance and the police are collecting intel on all the gang members but have no info on Gilbert. All they know is the fencing of property has slowed since he showed up. Snides thinks there may be a connection to the bank robberies but needs proof. Gilbert arrives home one day to find Andrea sitting on the bed with a shit ton of cash and even more questions. He eventually shows her a newspaper with a story about one of his bank jobs. He says he will pack his stuff and leave, but Andrea is intrigued and asks him to show her. Gilbert takes a pregnant Andrea to his next job. She sits in the car while he diverts the guard and then enters the bank. Once in the bank, he goes to the toilets and uses a tiny amount of dry ice to fill the bank with smoke that somehow chokes the staff as they run outside. A fire engine shows up almost instantaneously, and once a fireman goes in, Gilbert comes out dressed in firefighting gear and strolls over to the car. Andrea gets turned on by this. Andrea says that he must promise not to get caught, only rob from banks as they screw people over, and once they can retire that he is done. He says, "You have to promise me something," and pulls out an engagement ring. She says yes. Snides and Hoffman can't work out the final 2 gang members, but notice they both drive the same car. Snides goes into the club to take a look. Gilbert is talking to Tommy about lining up, the famous one last job, the big one. Tommy starts insisting Gilbert takes Bishop the drug addict on the job. Gilbert is not keen on that and heads to the toilet. Snides follows Gilbert into the toilets. Snides enters and Gilbert soon exits a stall in his suit as Robert Whiteman. They get talking a bit and Snides notices some of the prosthetic nose makeup still on Gilbert's face before he leaves. Snides gets woken up by a phone call from Hoffman telling him they have Diamond Dave in custody and he wants to talk with him. Dave spills the beans on Whiteman and tells Snides that he is in Vancouver on a job now. Snides hits Hoffman up for the money for a flight to Van. Gilbert and Bishop are casing out a bank. Bishop is jonesing for a fix and Gilbert is not pleased to be with him. Snides questions the woman at the acting store and the lady identifies Gilbert, saying he was now looking to hire some actors. Snides then goes to see Captain Burns and tells him about the planned robbery and asks to put surveillance on some banks. Snides and some officers are surveilling some locations but get nothing so far. Gilbert is meanwhile posing as a contractor working on the CCTV system in a jewelry store. A delivery of unordered trees are dropped off outside. Gilbert and Bishop go into action and hold up the store. The lady working there is less cooperative than the banks and tells him,
"No."
Bishop pulls a shotgun on the lady, much to Gilbert's surprise. Gilbert tells Bishop to hold the manager while he collects. Snides is getting increasingly suspicious of the delivery van and approaches it. Bishop shouts out Robert's name to tell him they have company. Gilbert gives Bishop jewels to pack away and Bishop puts his shotgun on the floor to do this. Gilbert then sets off a diversionary tactic by detonating flares in the tree pots. They then make their escape through the back, but not before Bishop forgets his shotgun on the floor. Snides is soon chasing them through the mall entrance. He bears down on two innocents dressed up as robbers for Halloween. Snides pulls the fire alarm and is able to get a visual on them and gives chase. They manage to lock themselves in a restaurant utility room, and while Bishop picks a lock to escape, Snides gets them at gunpoint. Bishop is successful and they manage to escape the mall and Snides is left stuck inside. Gilbert calls Andrea to tell her they are off to the Bahamas to retire. He then gives Bishop a train ticket to get back to Ottawa, telling him to keep away from the bar car. As soon as he arrives home, Andrea's water breaks and he drives them to the hospital to have the baby. She gives birth to a massive baby girl and they are both elated. By the time that the cops raid the Whiteman house, the place has been cleared and they are gone. Gilbert and Andrea move north to Ontario to lay low. Gilbert says he doesn't need the Bahamas anymore as long as he has her and the child. 18 months later, they are living a normal life and they have another baby on the way. One day there is a knock at the door. It's Tommy. They sit out on the porch and talk about things and old times. Gilbert starts noticing his stack getting thinner and thinner. Andrea tells him no more jobs, they had a deal. Gilbert promises he will not do another job. Early one morning he leaves the house for London, telling Andrea in a note. Andrea wakes up and Robert is gone. Outside, Detective Hoffman is surveilling the house with Snides. They have finally tracked him down. Snides calls the house asking for Rob and says that he will call back. Snides thinks he is on a job and they jump into action. Snides is out of leads until they decide to check the local airport where they find out Gilbert's destination. Gilbert does the job and gets a light aircraft back to Pembroke where Andrea will meet him. They meet at the airport, but within moments the Popo roll up and Gilbert is taken into custody. Gilbert apologizes to Andrea.
Sorry.
The cops raid Gilbert's home and Snides goes to Tommy's strip club to serve him papers. Snides tries to cut a deal with Gilbert, less time if he stitches up Tommy, but Gilbert isn't going to snitch on him. Tommy visits Gilbert in jail. They both apologize to each other. Gilbert is found guilty on all charges and is sentenced to 20 years. And that, my friends, is the end of this story for now, maybe. I hope that you have enjoyed this synopsis. Let us know what you thought in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more synopses. Love life, see you later.